Guys, this is Clint Locklear from Wolfer Nation, and I've tried to do this several times, so I'm going to try to break this down even further. I've had a couple of questions, and I actually had one guy promised I'd do a video about 2 weeks ago, so I apologize for that. But what it is, a lot of guys are seeing a lot of my stuff with kill poles. I'm not the first one that did it. Ron Hansen out of Iowa was. And then they read the books, they see the videos, and it's kind of hard to tell apparently of what it is. So I'm going to try to make a video that it breaks this down just so there's no questions whatsoever on what a kill pole is. Now, kill pole, we're not going to go into all the reasons or why. You can find that on the rest of the YouTube stuff or Trapping Radio, but the construction of how to build a kill pole. This is a metal one. This is for coyotes. It's 5/8 and it's 4.5 feet tall. This is one that I use. It's made out of fiberglass, which I'm going to explain how this one works. But I want to do this up close and personal, so if you want to build these, you'll know exactly how to do it. Because as far as I know, you're not going to find supply houses that are going to be selling these. They're heavy. They're not expensive to make, but they're heavy to ship and pack, and it's just not something the market's ever really done. Now, this one is fiberglass, but I want to show how you make it, because how you make it is pretty irrelevant about the fiberglass, but I'm going to show you how you do the fiberglass. Come up here real close, Travis. It doesn't matter if you're using re-rod or not. You'll see the basic premise. You've got a weld, a loop, and a weld, a weld, a loop, and a weld. Now I'm going to explain the other wire here in a second. So the easiest way to do this is get a pair of vice grips and set it here, make you a loop. A lot of times I'll use a hammer handle, and I'll take another piece of vice grips and I'll just squeeze it down right there, and then I can zap it with the welder, zap it with a welder, and I've got this long piece of number 9 wire coming off. So this starts as one piece of wire, and it's probably going to be about 2.5 to 3 feet long. So I zap it, I've got the loop, I zap it, and I've got the loop. And then what I do is just with my hand, I give it 2 or 3 wraps. And what this wrap does is take pressure off of this weld. So if you just weld this, it's going to weaken it because of the wire. And then you're moving it around out here, it's probably going to break. But if you come down a little bit and you give it 2 or 3 wraps, it's got all kind of springiness to it, and you're not taking anything off of that. Now you will notice on this particular kill pole, that's all this is. I've seen people weld all kind of washers and fence staples and everything. All that's fine. All this loop is for is to keep your snare right here, which I'm getting ready to show you. That's all the purpose this is. Up top, so it can't slide down or come off. This wire is for your snare support. That's all this is. So that's what this is. Now, you'll notice that this is bent on the bottom. And then I've got some in some of the videos, and I just want to show this, that's bent on the top. And then what happens a lot of times is you have an animal that gets caught, you get all this twisted up. So I thought maybe if I went off the top, it would always be underneath. It may help a little bit, but not much. So whether your wrap and your wire comes from the top or the bottom, it's irrelevant. Simple is what makes this thing work so good. So in the re-rod, it's just weld, bend, weld, and wrap. That's all it is on the re-rod. The original ones were a lot more complicated. They had washers and cotter pins and all that. We don't have to do all that. Now this one being fiberglass, that's what this is. Just a fiberglass fence post. This, to make the fiberglass kill poles, is a piece of thin conduit that you just go down to your local hardware store and get it just where you can slide it over the fence post. You don't put this together yet. You cut them in sections. You'll see this one's about 6-7 inches long. It's just a piece of conduit. So you get a 10-foot section every 6-8 inches. You just whack it with your chop saw or your grinder. And then, why it's individual like that, you weld, bend, weld, and then you slide your pole up in here, because this is round, and you'll notice that this now is oblong. And all you do to keep this on here is take a chisel or a big flat screwdriver. Can you see those marks, Travis?
Yep.
And then you hit those in there, and what that does is it pushes the metal and crimps that metal into this fiberglass, and it's completely impossible. 3 or 4 of these on one side, 3 or 4 of these on the other, and it's completely done. And this will never come apart. There's no way to come it apart. So if you're going to do it on the fiberglass, you do the welds before you put the fiberglass in there, because it gets real hot, of course. And then you slide it on, and you basically you just hit it with a hammer or the chisel, and that imprint goes through, and it causes a lock. So how we're rigging these up is really simple. The loop, which is right here, the only function of that is to keep the snare right through here. So we're going to run our snare back through itself. All of the pressure of a caught animal is still on the pole. What you don't want to do is hook it to this. This is number 9 wire. If you're as bad as welder as me, you don't want to be trying to keep that pressure right there. All it does is keep it from going down. That's the only purpose. That's why you can use fence staples or whatever you want. But this is just a cheap alternative. And then you come up here with your loop after you drive this thing in the ground, and you attach the snare with either your plastic tubing, rubber tubing, or your whammy. And this will go in about that far into the ground, and you can now adjust this loop any way that you see fit to get it directly in front of where the coyote's at. So this is how we're attaching it, which is right there, so it can't go anywhere. And this wire holds your whammy or your tubing, and that's all these things are, guys. It's really that simple. Now, I know trappers, just by nature, y'all always want to complicate things. More than welcome. Just keep the premise the same. Something to hold the snare up here, because if you have an animal snared and you catch him and he's always pulling down because he's running around in a circle, he can't pull your stake up. That's why this needs to stay up at the top. And this is just a handy, convenient way of having a support wire and a stake, so you don't have to worry about what's ever in your environment. In tall grass, you can use these. That's what the kill pole's for. But that's how simple it is a weld, a bend, and a weld, and a wrap. And give yourself enough wire that you can move this around where you need to in front of the trail. So that's how you build or construct a snare pole. That is how you hook the snare up to the snare pole. And it's as simple as that. So I hope it helps you out if you've been having questions.